Hello, this is Darwin Shurig
And Josh Mayo.
of Shurig Solutions Incorporated and a member of the MRI Network. Today we're going to discuss the key elements of design controls relevant to the FDA and ISO standards for medical devices. Design controls help any company manage the quality, make sure the product is safe and reproducible, and also meet the requirements of its intended use, while also helping manage risk for future issues and prevent potential recalls. Design controls are regulated by the FDA under 21 CFR 820.30, and it applies to Class 2 and Class 3 medical devices generally.
So some of the topics that we're going to cover today, design and development planning, the design inputs, the outputs, design review, design verification and validation, and then design transfer, design changes, and then we'll finish up with the design history file. So Darwin's going to start off talking about the design and development planning.
So the planning, under 820.30, it states that each manufacturer shall establish and maintain plans that describe or reference the design and development activities, and also define those responsibilities for its implementation. You have to show the plan identifies and describes the interfaces which different groups and activities and who's responsible for those activities. The plan should be reviewed and updated as design and development evolves. Essentially, this part of the document lays out your medical device process, and it's going to include all aspects of what you're making, how all those parts are going to be made, how they're going to be tested, and who's responsible for each task. Most importantly, changes need to be continuously updated in that original plan document.
So the design inputs are really, it's the requirements of the device. This is both what physically the device is going to be, and then the performance requirements for that device. Subsection C of 820.30 is where you'll find kind of the actual requirements for this. But in short, you need to define three different things. The first is going to be the functional requirements, or what the device is actually going to do for the end user or the patient. Second, you need to define the performance requirements, or how it's actually going to work. And then lastly, you need to define the interface requirements. So how will this device work with other systems, maybe from this manufacturer or a different manufacturer? But all these definitions will need to be documented up front, and it's important to really spend a lot of time initially doing this. This could actually be about a third of the total project.
Document.
Yeah, but if it's done correctly up front, it's going to save both time and money down the line if you don't have to continue to make changes.
Absolutely. And if you didn't document, you didn't do it. Design outputs. Design outputs are the final results of all the design and engineering work. They're usually represented in models, drawings, engineering analysis, and other documents. The outputs are the documents that you essentially give to the manufacturer if they were going to make the device and its components. It's what the end product or the deliverable is going to look like. It's important, like all these different things, that those outputs are reviewed, that they're going to be approved, and then signed off on. Tracking through this entire process is extremely important, so establishing a traceability through this process is really important.
Yeah, and it's the documentation piece. It just has to be documented and to stay organized. So I guess part of the next step is going to be the review, the design review. And this is really kind of a formal look into the device itself. And you need to be asking, is this right? Is this device buildable, and is it doing what we actually want it to do?
Reproducible.
Exactly. Yeah, it's reproducible. It's great, but if you have one and it's going to cost you, 10 times what you could sell it for, then that's not realistic for a business model.
So you got to make profit.
Figuring out how to, make it so it's sustainable for your company.
Yeah.
But that's not just a one-time review. Design review should be done at every step of, every phase of the process, and be continual.
Absolutely. So next up, design verification. Simply put, you're going to make sure your design output conforms to your design inputs. Design verification shows that you built the product exactly the way you actually intended it to do. So it includes a lot of testing of various components through the overall development process. Again, having a traceability matrix is extremely important. It's going to help make sure your process is cleaner, make sure that your inputs related to issues, testing, in case you need to go back to those, making sure those inputs and outputs match up, but also if you need to go back and change something, that you can find that easily.
Okay. And then the validation carries on from the verification. So the device validation is going to make sure that the product is once again what the end user is looking for. Does this device actually meet and satisfy the needs of the user? Whereas the previous part is you're making sure that you did produce what you wanted to produce. Now we're making sure that it actually conforms to what the need is. So testing is going to be conducted for this just to make sure that in a simulated environment or the expected environment of where this device is going to be used, to make sure that it's working correctly. Deficiencies should be noted during this phase. Anything from even the packaging, how the device is going to get transported, and then the end user ability. And then these deficiencies can then be ranked and addressed according to the severity to mitigate the risk down the line.
And all that has to go into the design history file. So design transfer, how does it work? Okay, you know what you want to make, you know what you're going to be making, and you've verified and validated that it's actually going to work. So now you're going to design transfer. Essentially, you're going to show how that device is designed, put into manufacturing, what those installation specs are going to be. Anyone could be making, moving, installing your product. They need the details of what that looks like, how to do it safely, how to do it effectively, and then have all the plans and processes for what that looks like.
Okay. And then the design change. So whether it's you decide to make the product a little differently, or a deficiency was noted previously that must be changed, documentation is going to be key. So what was being changed, why it was being changed, when it was changed, and then ultimately you need to also document who approved the change and who signed off on it. And good file structure is going to be key to keeping the design history file clean. And so the end user or the FDA, if they're looking at this particular device, they can
or
track.
ISO.
Yeah, exactly, ISO. They can see, okay, this happened, and then so we switched it to that, and this is why it was changed. But yeah, so documentation, I think that's kind of been the key throughout this entire process is document.
And why you made those changes. So we talked about the design history file. So as we finish up here, lastly, your design history file is essentially your master file. All aspects of the process for developing, for verifying, for validating, and really just making your medical device. So every single design control element through this process is going to have activities that need to be documented, certainly need to be reviewed, and as you've heard all through this, they need to be signed off on. So that's where you're going to store all that information and update it as you have changes. It's so important to review that design history file on a regular basis to make sure you're keeping up with any changes to your product, to make sure that you're regulatory compliant. Kind of matches up, we talked about FMEA, right, in one of our previous videos, and how that needs to be a part of the entire process. So we hope this brought you some value. We're going to post the complete article from Nico Kruger, who talks about this. If you want to look into this further, I think it's a great document that he put together to give us some more insight here. We hope this brings you value, and we look forward to bringing you value now or in the future for your career objectives or critical needs positions.